Imagine, just for a second, giving the absolute best years of your life to your employer.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a familiar feeling for a lot of people.
Right, like you put in the grueling overtime, you sacrifice your physical health, you literally take a few hits for the team.
You give them everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the major project wraps up. Leadership calls you in. But instead of a promotion or, even just a basic thank you, they look you right in the eye and let you go.
Just like that.
Just like that. Zero severance, no health care, just a cold, hard, your usefulness has expired.
It's the ultimate systemic betrayal, honestly. It completely shatters that foundational belief you have that loyalty and hard work are, somehow naturally rewarded.
Which brings us to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Because in the real world, if that happens to you, you might, I don't know, call an employment lawyer or just vent on social media.
Right. Leave a really angry review somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. But we're looking at the original 1815 text of the Grimm fairy tale, The Blue Light, or Das blaue Licht. And in this story, a discarded employee wanders into a forest, finds a magical dwarf, and violently overthrows the entire government.
Which is quite the escalation from a bad review.
It really is. So today, we are tearing apart this bizarre, deeply unsettling revenge fantasy. We're going to use a lot of humor, but we're also going to look at it through a really modern lens.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to approach it.
Right. We want to understand the messy psychology of the broken social contract, look at how the king's leadership compares to today's toxic CEOs, and really dig into this terrifying concept of righteous victimhood.
It's just a phenomenal text to unpack because, it strips away all of our modern legal padding. It forces us to look at the raw underlying mechanisms of human behavior when the rules of society completely collapse.
Well, let's start right at that collapse, because the opening of this source text, it feels like it was ripped straight from a modern corporate nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
We have this soldier. He has served his king loyally for years. He's covered in wounds from fighting the king's wars.
Literal physical trauma.
Yes. And the war ends, and the king dismisses him with a statement so brutally corporate, it honestly gave me whiplash reading it.
It's a rough quote.
He basically says, you can go home, I don't need you anymore, and you won't get any more money, because wages are only for those who provide me with a service.
The callousness is staggering. I mean, the king is essentially operating as an algorithm here.
Yes.
He's optimizing for pure, immediate utility. Past loyalty means absolutely nothing.
He's the ultimate toxic modern CEO. He's looking at a wounded veteran and treating him like a piece of depreciated machinery.
Yeah.
How does a person's brain even process that level of discarding?
Psychologically, it creates this massive cognitive dissonance because we all operate on something called the social contract.
Right.
This is the unspoken, deeply ingrained agreement that if you sacrifice your individual safety for the greater good of the group.
Like the kingdom or Campina.
Exactly. The agreement is that the group will provide a safety net when you are vulnerable. So when the king fires him, he isn't just taking away the soldier's paycheck.
He's taking away the rules of the game.
Yes, he is destroying the soldier's entire understanding of how the universe works.
So the soldier suddenly realizes he's living in a purely transactional universe.
And that realization is profoundly traumatizing. I mean, the soldier's entire identity was built on being a loyal servant.
Right. He was the good guy.
Once that identity is violently stripped away, he is left with absolutely zero structural support. He's forced to just wander aimlessly into the woods, totally consumed by basic survival anxiety.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And this initial devastating injustice is the psychological engine that drives every single decision he makes for the rest of the story.
Okay, so that brings him to the woods, and he runs into a witch. He begs her for food and shelter, says he's going to starve. The witch agrees, but she runs like a pretty ruthless gig economy of her own.
She definitely does. Nothing is free.
Nothing. She demands heavy manual labor. Day 1, he digs her garden. Day 2, he chops a massive amount of wood. And finally, on the 3rd day, she lowers him in a basket into a dry, abandoned well.
To fetch this magical blue light that never goes out.
Right. So he finds the light, he signals to be pulled up. But as he nears the top, the witch reaches down to grab the light before he's actually out of the well.
And he flat out refuses to give it to her.
He tells her, I'm not giving you this light until I have both feet firmly on the ground, which makes her furious, and she just drops him back down the well to die.
It's a brutal reaction.
It is. But I have to challenge the soldier's logic here for a second. If I am literally dangling in a basket in a dark well completely in the mercy of a witch.
You'd give her the light.
I am handing over the light. Refusing her seems like a terrible, almost suicidal negotiation tactic.
Well, on the surface, it absolutely looks irrational. But we have to view this through the lens of his recent trauma. You are assuming a baseline level of trust. The assumption that if you fulfill your end of the bargain, the other party will pull you up.
Sure.
The soldier no longer has that baseline.
Because the king already proved that fulfilling your end of the bargain means absolutely nothing.
Exactly. The soldier has undergone a profound psychological pivot. Just a few days ago, he trusted the ultimate authority figure, gave him everything, and was left to die.
So he's not falling for it again.
Right. He has learned this bitter, agonizing lesson. Never blindly trust anyone who holds power over you. Because if someone holds all the cards, they will betray you the second their needs are met.
Wow. So he demands collateral.
Yes. He demands his physical safety first.
That makes so much sense. It isn't just stubbornness, it's a newly formed defense mechanism. It's really the death of his naivety.
Very well put.
But, it still gets him dropped down a well.
Yeah, it doesn't work out great initially.
Not at all. So he lands safely on the damp ground. But he realizes he's trapped. He is going to starve down there. So he sits in the dark, pulls out his pipe, and decides to light it with the magic blue light to just enjoy one last smoke.
Which is such a fascinating behavioral response.
Really? How so?
Well, in the face of absolute insurmountable helplessness, the human brain seeks out one tiny sliver of agency.
Oh, I see.
Lighting the pipe is a way to reclaim a microfraction of control over his final moments. He gets to choose how he spends his last hour.
But the moment the smoke from that pipe fills the cave, this little black dwarf, a mannequin, appears out of nowhere. And the dwarf says, "Master, what are your commands?"
The ultimate game changer.
Seriously. He explains he has to do whatever the holder of the blue light desires. Suddenly, the soldier has the ultimate rapid response crisis manager. It's just an absolute blank check of power.
And we really need to look very closely at how the soldier chooses to spend that blank check, because the escalation here is terrifying.
Okay, so first, he orders the dwarf to get him out of the well. Totally reasonable.
Completely reasonable.
On the way out through a tunnel, the dwarf shows him the witch's hidden treasure, and the soldier takes as much gold as he can carry.
Also reasonable. Let's call it back pay, with heavy interest for the wood chopping.
I love that. Back pay. But the moment he steps above ground, he turns to the dwarf and says, "Now go tie up the old witch and take her to the judge."
Notice that it's a very specific request for institutional justice. He asks for a judge.
He does, but he doesn't get one. Almost immediately, the witch rides past on a wild tomcat, screaming in terror, and the dwarf reappears seconds later and says, "All done. The witch is already hanging from the gallows."
And the absolute speed of that violence tells us everything we need to know about this new dynamic.
Because there's no trial.
There is no due process whatsoever. The soldier asked for the legal system, but the magical power he now wields bypasses the system entirely and delivers immediate lethal retribution.
And the really crazy part is the soldier doesn't object to this. He just accepts it.
He fully embraces it.
Yeah. He takes his new gold, leaves the forest, and goes straight back to the city where the king lives. He checks into the best hotel, buys fancy clothes, orders the most magnificent room.
He's experiencing this massive influx of unearned wealth and power. It's like a tech bro getting overnight funding.
Exactly. And once he's settled, he decides it's time to settle the score with the king.
The motive is clear, but the target he chooses for his revenge reveals some of the darkest corners of human psychology.
This part is so rough. He orders the dwarf to go to the palace late at night, kidnap the sleeping princess, bring her to his hotel room, and force her to do maid's work.
Yeah.
At midnight, the dwarf drops the sleeping princess on the floor. The soldier screams at her to sweep the room. Then he stretches out his feet, tells her to take his boots off, and literally throws his dirty boots into her face.
It's awful.
And she has to silently clean and polish them until the rooster crows.
What was your immediate reaction to that sequence as a modern reader?
I mean, I was appalled. The king is the one who ruined his life. The king is the toxic leader who discarded him. Why is the soldier taking his rage out on a woman who had nothing to do with it, throwing boots at her face?
It's very hard to read.
This isn't a quest for justice. It's just pure vindictive abuse.
It is abuse, and we have to sit with the discomfort of the story, framing this as part of his, heroic revenge. From a behavioral science standpoint, we are witnessing the exact mechanism of displaced aggression.
Displaced aggression, meaning he can't hit the person he actually wants to hit, so he hits someone else.
Yes, but the why is crucial here. The human brain, when entirely stripped of agency and humiliated the way he was, desperately seeks to restore equilibrium.
Right, he wants to feel powerful again.
Exactly. It craves dominance to overwrite the trauma of submission. But the king is a structural fortress. The king represents an intimidating, insurmountable psychological wall.
Even with the magic dwarf.
Even with the magic dwarf. Confronting the king directly is just too immense a leap for the soldier right now. His brain isn't ready for that final boss battle.
So his brain reroutes that need for dominance toward a safer proxy target.
Precisely. But he doesn't just pick anyone on the street. He targets the princess because she is the most prized extension of the king.
Oh, wow.
In the brutal logic of this universe, she's a symbol of the king's untouchable status. By dragging her down into the dirt, he degrades the king safely. And notice what he makes her do.
Unpaid, humiliating, physical servitude.
Yes, he forces her into the exact same degrading position he was forced into by the witch and abandoned to by her father.
He is mimicking his abusers. He was treated like garbage, so the moment he gets power, he treats someone else like garbage to prove he's no longer at the bottom of the food chain.
That is the tragedy of unhealed trauma combined with absolute power. He has zero interest in fixing the broken system or creating actual fairness in society.
He just wants to be the one holding the whip.
Exactly.
And this abuse continues for nights. The princess wakes up the next morning and tells the king she had this terrifying dream about being carried through the streets to clean a soldier's boots.
The king's reaction is pretty telling here.
Right. The king realizes it might not be a dream and initiates some incredibly low-tech royal counter-espionage. First, he tells her to fill her pocket with peas and poke a hole in it, so she leaves a trail to the kidnapper.
A classic tracking mechanism, very Hansel and Gretel.
Totally.
Right.
But it fails because the king fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the threat.
Right, because the dwarf is standing right there, invisible, listening to the whole plan.
So that night, the dwarf hacks the system. He scatters peas all over every single street in the city. The next morning, the king's men try to follow the trail, but there isn't one. Instead, there are hundreds of starving children sitting in the streets picking up peas, thinking it literally rained food.
That image is just so striking to me.
It's wild.
The king's elaborate attempt to protect his structural power inadvertently becomes a desperately needed food drop for the city's poorest citizens.
Wow, I didn't even think about it like that.
It really highlights the massive disconnect between the ruling class and the populace. The king clearly has the resources to scatter food across an entire city, but he only does it to track a kidnapped asset.
So the king's structural power is failing against this asymmetrical magical threat. Plan B. The king tells the princess to keep her shoes on in bed, and if she's taken, to hide one of them in the room.
And the dwarf overhears this too.
He does, and he warns the soldier. He explicitly says, I don't have a countermeasure for this. If they find the shoe, you're going to face the full weight of the law. Let's just lay low.
And here we see the blinding arrogance of sudden power.
The soldier completely ignores the warning. He demands the dwarf bring her anyway. He's just drunk on his own dominance.
And it ruins him.
It totally ruins him. She hides the shoe under his bed. The king's men search the city. They find the shoe, and the soldier is immediately forced to go on the run.
Right.
But here is the most baffling part of the entire text.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
When the guards catch him and throw him in prison, he forgets to take his magical blue light. He just leaves it behind.
This is where we see the critical difference between structural power and what we might call lottery power.
Lottery power, like someone winning $100 million but going bankrupt 3 years later.
Exactly. When someone acquires sudden, unearned dominance, like a lottery win or a magical lamp, they get all the immediate benefits, but they lack the foundational scaffolding to maintain it.
Right. The king has the scaffolding.
Yes. The king has structural power. He has guards, laws, institutions. That power exists even when the king is sleeping. The soldier only has lottery power. He hasn't built the habits, the alliances, or the structural resilience to wield it sustainably.
So the moment he is physically separated from his artifact, the illusion just shatters.
Completely shatters.
20 minutes ago, he was a god, and now he's just a terrified guy in chains. The system just swallows him right back up.
But he does have one resource left.
True. In his prison cell, he finds a single ducat, just one gold coin. He goes to the barred window and sees one of his old army comrades walking by. He knocks on the glass and bribes his buddy with his very last coin to run to the hotel and fetch his bundle, which contains the blue light.
It is the most grounded, realistic moment in a story that is completely full of magic.
It really is. Because in a narrative dominated by flying witches and top-down royal authority, what actually saves him from the executioner?
Horizontal solidarity. A peer, someone who shares his class and his history. Top-down power proves to be incredibly fragile for the soldier, but a horizontal relationship, even one secured with a desperate bribe, is what actually functions when everything else fails.
That is such a good point.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the climax of the story, and arguably the most disturbing conceptual leap the text makes.
Oh, definitely.
So the comrade brings the light. The dwarf appears in the cell and tells the soldier to just go along with the trial, let it play out. So the trial happens. The judge sentences the soldier to death. But the narrator of the fairy tale inserts a line that genuinely made me stop reading and just stare at the page.
It's a huge moment.
The narrator claims that the soldier, quote, had done nothing wrong.
That is a staggering assertion for the text to make.
I am still trying to wrap my head around it. Done nothing wrong. He kidnapped a woman against her will, held her hostage for multiple nights, subjected her to psychological and physical degradation. How can any narrative framework possibly justify framing him as innocent?
To understand that, we have to look at the terrifying paradox of righteous victimhood.
Righteous victimhood, meaning, because I was hurt, I am incapable of doing wrong.
It goes even deeper than that. In the moral universe of this historical text, the initial injustice done to the soldier the king discarding a wounded veteran is viewed as an original sin so massive that it breaks the very rules of humanity.
Okay, I'm following.
The logic operating here is, because the system violated the social contract first, the soldier is retroactively absolved of any moral obligation to that system or its people.
So because the king broke the rules, the soldier feels he has a blank check to commit atrocities, and the universe just agrees with him.
Yes. And this is a deeply relevant psychological framework today.
How so?
Think about modern corporate whistleblowers who become intensely toxic themselves, or historical revolutions that overthrow a dictator only to install an even bloodier regime.
Oh, right, like the French Revolution.
Exactly. When victims become tyrants, they rarely view themselves as evil. They view themselves as morally justified because they are constantly pointing back to the initial wrong done to them. The trauma provides a permanent alibi for their own cruelty.
Wow. And he cashes that blank check at the gallows.
He does.
He is standing before the executioner, and he asks the king for one last favor. They smoke his pipe. The king arrogantly grants it, promising absolutely no mercy. So the soldier lights his pipe with the blue light, 2 puffs of smoke, and the dwarf appears. But this time, the dwarf has a massive club in his hand.
The tone shifts completely.
Yeah, the soldier looks at it and says, "Strike down the false judges, their guards, and don't spare the king who treated me so badly."
The transition from victim to absolute dictator happens in seconds.
The dwarf just moves like lightning. Anyone he touches with the club falls to the ground, incapacitated. The king watches his entire structural power get physically bludgeoned into submission. Terrified, the king begs for his life. And to save himself, he surrenders the entire kingdom to the soldier and gives him the princess as his wife.
It is the ultimate hostile takeover.
It is. But look at what actually changes. That the soldier destroys a corrupt system, yes. But does he reform it? Does he establish a new social contract that protects the vulnerable? Not at all. He installs himself at the top through sheer, unchecked violence and forces a marriage on the woman he's been torturing.
If we evaluate this new leadership, the new boss is structurally identical to the old boss.
Exactly so.
The only difference is that the new boss possesses a magical enforcer with a club. The soldier hasn't brought justice to the kingdom. He has merely monopolized the violence.
Yeah.
The citizens just traded a callous, calculating CEO for a volatile, traumatized dictator who takes whatever he wants by force. It is a happy ending strictly for the man holding the blue light.
It's incredible how a centuries-old fairy tale maps so perfectly onto the darkest aspects of modern ambition. We follow this discarded, marginalized veteran who had every right to demand justice.
He absolutely did.
But his journey shows how the desperate need for control, when it's fueled by unhealed trauma, twists the pursuit of fairness into a pursuit of domination.
Which is exactly why these stories remain vital for us to study. They remind us that the human software basically hasn't changed.
Right.
The urge to mimic our abusers, the fragility of sudden power, the blinding nature of righteous victimhood, these are constants. What has evolved is our legal and ethical framework. We now have modern laws precisely to short-circuit this kind of escalating unchecked retribution.
It's a really stark warning about the cycle of abuse. We've all felt the sting of unfairness, that deep, burning desire for the universe to balance the scales and punish the people who wronged us.
Of course. It's a very natural feeling.
But this story forces us to look in the mirror and ask what we would actually do if we had the means to enforce that punishment.
It removes the comforting illusion that being a victim automatically makes you a good person.
That is so true. So I want to leave you with a thought to mull over today. Imagine you're walking home feeling completely chewed up and spit out by the world, and you find that blue light.
Just sitting there.
Yeah. If you were suddenly handed ultimate unchecked power with absolutely no laws or consequences to hold you back, how long would it take for your personal pursuit of justice to become a pursuit of absolute control? It's a dangerous hypothetical.
Would you have the self-awareness to break the cycle, or would you just become the next king?
A profound question to ask ourselves about the nature of our own grievances.
Definitely something to think about the next time you feel the urge to settle a score. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.